Thank you for being a valued supporter of the 10X podcast group. Your dedication means the world to us. Today, we bring you a gripping tale titled, The Social Climber. Your continued support and subscription fuel our passion for storytelling, and we deeply appreciate every moment you spend with us. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's compelling narrative. The Social Climber. Chapter 1. The Invitation. Marla Greystone stood in the shadows of the opulent ballroom, the hum of polite conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses buzzing around her. She adjusted the delicate mask of confidence she wore like armor, the sequined gown she'd borrowed glinting under the chandeliers. It wasn't hers, of course. Nothing in her life truly was. But tonight, she didn't need ownership, just the illusion of belonging. The invitation had been a stroke of luck. Or fate. Or a well-calculated act of desperation. Marla had spent weeks haunting thrift shops and studying society columns to perfect her act. When she overheard a junior assistant at a boutique gushing about her boss's invite to the Langford Foundation Gala, Marla saw her opening. A misplaced handbag, a slip of paper snatched while no one was looking, and suddenly, she had the golden ticket. The Langford Foundation Gala wasn't just an event, it was the event. The most influential figures in the city gathered here, cloaked in wealth and power. For someone like Marla, resourceful, hungry, and invisible, it was a hunting ground. Her eyes darted across the room, cataloging faces she'd studied from glossy magazines and news articles. Senator Horace Carrington, whose wife was rumored to keep a separate estate for privacy. Evelyn Gage, the media mogul whose carefully curated persona couldn't hide the whispers of blackmail and corporate espionage. They were players in a game Marla barely understood but desperately wanted to master. She gripped her glass of sparkling water. Champagne was too risky for someone who couldn't afford to lose her wits, and took a deliberate step forward. Her first target loomed near the bar, Sebastian Wellesley, heir to a crumbling shipping empire. Wealthy, charming in a careless way, and most importantly, disenchanted with the world he was born into. Sebastian was known to take up causes simply to irritate his father. If Marla could align herself with his whims, she'd have a foothold in the elite world she craved. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smooth, with just a hint of shyness as she approached. "I couldn't help but overhear, you're talking about the Bellamy exhibit at the Crawford Gallery, aren't you?" Sebastian turned, his ice-blue eyes scanning her with practiced indifference. "And if I am?" Marla tilted her head, letting a lock of auburn hair slip over her shoulder. "It's just rare to find someone who appreciates Bellamy's earlier works. His use of shadow and contrast in Silent Reverie is so haunting. Don't you think?" She didn't know the first thing about Bellamy or his works. All she had was a half-remembered quote from an article she'd skimmed, but the gamble paid off. Sebastian's lips curved into a faint smile, his interest piqued. Not many people can see past the overexposure of his later career. "You're Marla." She extended her hand, allowing just a flicker of uncertainty to soften her expression. Vulnerability was a powerful currency among the jaded elite. Marla Greystone. Sebastian Wellesley. His handshake was brief but firm, and when he didn't immediately excuse himself, Marla knew she'd secured her first connection. "You have an eye for art. Rare around here. I suppose I see things differently." She smiled as if harboring a secret. Not everyone appreciates subtlety. Their conversation ebbed and flowed, each word calculated, each pause deliberate. Marla allowed Sebastian to feel superior, a connoisseur guiding an eager novice. By the time they parted, she had secured an invitation to a private viewing at his family's gallery. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Marla spent the rest of the evening weaving through the crowd, each interaction a delicate dance. With every handshake, every laugh, she felt herself slipping further into this world. The thrill of deception was intoxicating, but she kept her focus sharp. One misstep, one wrong name or misplaced comment, and it would all unravel. As the night drew to a close, Marla stepped outside into the cool night air, her stolen identity still intact. The city stretched before her, glittering with possibilities. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel, hope. But hope was a dangerous thing. And in the shadows of the gala, Someone watched her leave, a smirk playing on their lips. Marla wasn't the only one playing a game tonight. The Social Climber. Chapter 2. The Network. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and faint traces of cigar smoke as Marla stepped into the Wellesley Gallery. The space was dimly lit, a deliberate attempt to make every piece of art seem more mysterious, more profound. Sebastian's family may have been drowning in debt, but they spared no expense on appearances. Every corner of the gallery whispered of wealth, prestige, and exclusivity, exactly the environment Marla intended to conquer. Sebastian greeted her with a languid wave, his perpetual air of disinterest masking what Marla suspected was a growing curiosity about her. "Marla, you made it," he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "Of course. I wouldn't miss the chance to see Silent Reverie in person." Marla smiled, her expression warm but calculated. Her research had paid off. The Bellamy piece was the centerpiece of tonight's private showing, and Marla had woven it into their initial conversation for precisely this moment. "Follow me." Sebastian led her past clusters of guests murmuring over champagne flutes, his pace slow enough for her to catch snippets of conversation. Marla's mind raced as she picked out names and connections. Evelyn Gage was here, speaking in hushed tones with a man Marla recognized from business columns, Edward Langford, Victoria's older brother and the rumored brains behind the family fortune. Marla kept her face composed as Sebastian paused in front of a towering canvas cloaked in shadows. He gestured dramatically, and a spotlight illuminated the painting. Silent Reverie lived up to its name, a dark, brooding piece that seemed to pull you into its depths. "What do you think?" Sebastian asked, his voice softer now, almost reverent. Marla tilted her head, studying the piece. She had no real opinion, but she understood the importance of a compelling reaction. "It's haunting. There's a loneliness to it, but also defiance. Like the figure refuses to be forgotten, even in the dark." Sebastian blinked, clearly taken aback. "That's exactly how I feel about it." She turned to him, her eyes wide with a touch of surprise. "Really? That's incredible. I was worried I might sound pretentious." "Not at all," he said, and for the first time, his smile seemed genuine. The moment lingered, and Marla felt the shift in their dynamic. She wasn't just a guest at his gallery, she was someone Sebastian wanted to understand, perhaps even impress. The night unfolded like a carefully orchestrated play. Marla moved through the room with ease, each introduction seamlessly blending into the next. Evelyn Gage turned out to be sharper than Marla anticipated, her dark eyes piercing as she asked question after question about Marla's background. "And where did you say you were from again?" Evelyn asked, her tone light but her gaze intense. "Boston," Marla replied smoothly. "My mother's family is from there. I've been back and forth for most of my life." Evelyn's lips twitched into what might have been a smile. "Interesting. I know a few Greystones in Boston. Any relation?" "Possibly distant," Marla said, her laugh delicate. "Our family tree is a bit of a maze, to be honest." Evelyn's stare lingered for a moment longer before she nodded. "You'll have to let me know if you're ever in need of connections. It's a small world after all." "I'd be honored," Marla said, her voice dripping with gratitude. But inside, she was already cataloging Evelyn as a potential threat. Later in the evening, Marla found herself cornered by Victoria Langford. The heiress was the opposite of Sebastian in every way, precise, polished, and intimidatingly direct. "So, you're the woman who's caught my brother's attention," Victoria said, her smile icy. Marla matched her expression with a demure tilt of her head. "Sebastian is kind. He's been very welcoming." "Kindness isn't his strong suit," Victoria said sharply. "And neither is subtlety. Whatever game you're playing, be careful. This world isn't as forgiving as it looks." Marla's heart skipped, but she kept her composure. "I'm not playing any games, Miss Langford. I'm just grateful to be here." Victoria leaned in, her voice a low murmur. "Gratitude doesn't last long in circles like this. I suggest you figure out what does." As Victoria walked away, Marla's resolve hardened. If the Langfords wanted a game, she would give them one they'd never forget. When the night ended, Marla returned to her tiny apartment, the cheap walls and flickering lights a stark contrast to the luxury she'd spent hours pretending to belong to. She sat at her rickety kitchen table, sketching out connections and notes on a napkin. Sebastian was her way in, but Evelyn and Victoria were her biggest obstacles. She would need to tread carefully while deepening her roots. As she worked, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown, you're playing with fire, little climber. Watch your step. Marla stared at the message, her breath catching. Someone had seen through her. But who? And why warn her? The game had only just begun, and the stakes were already higher than she'd imagined. The Social Climber. Chapter 3. The Facade. The smell of fresh coffee brewing in her small kitchenette did little to soothe Marla's growing anxiety. She sat cross-legged on her creaky couch, phone in hand, staring at the cryptic text from the night before. You're playing with fire, little climber. Watch your step. No name. No number she recognized. No further messages. Whoever had sent it knew what she was up to. That much was clear. But were they threatening her? Warning her? Or toying with her? She bit her lip, debating whether to respond. Her instincts told her not to. Instead, she tossed her phone onto the table and buried herself in preparations for her next move. Whoever was behind the message would reveal themselves eventually, or she'd be ready if they didn't. Marla's opportunity came sooner than expected. A day after the gallery event, Sebastian invited her to join him for lunch at the Meridian, an exclusive restaurant frequented by the city's elite. It wasn't just a casual meal, it was an audition. If she could hold her own in such a public, high-stakes setting, Sebastian might see her as someone worth keeping around. Dressed in a tailored navy dress she'd thrifted and altered herself, Marla arrived at the restaurant precisely on time. The Meridian's minimalist design screamed sophistication, with white marble floors and gold-accented fixtures gleaming under soft lighting. Every patron looked as though they belonged to a different world, their polished exteriors a sharp contrast to Marla's carefully curated facade. Sebastian greeted her with a lazy grin, his disheveled hair and unbuttoned collar suggesting he hadn't put much thought into his appearance. It didn't matter, he didn't need to. Men like Sebastian could afford to look effortless. I ordered the wine, he said as she slid into the seat across from him. Figured you'd appreciate a Pinot Noir. Am I wrong? Marla smiled, grateful she'd read up on wine pairings the night before. Not at all. Excellent choice. The waiter arrived with their glasses, and Marla deftly mirrored Sebastian's casual sophistication as she sipped, nodding approvingly. The dance began. So, tell me, Sebastian said, leaning back in his chair, how does someone like you end up in a place like this? Marla tilted her head, her expression a careful mix of curiosity and amusement. You mean someone without a trust fund? Sebastian chuckled. You're sharp. I like that. She set her glass down, her fingers lightly tracing the stem. Let's just say I'm drawn to beautiful things. And I've learned that sometimes you have to create your own opportunities to appreciate them. An opportunist, he mused, his tone more intrigued than critical. I can respect that. Marla's heart raced, but she kept her smile steady. Sebastian's words were a double-edged sword. He respected ambition, but ambition unchecked could easily turn into a liability in his world. As their lunch progressed, Marla played her role flawlessly. She let Sebastian steer the conversation, interjecting with just enough wit and insight to keep him engaged. She didn't reveal much about herself, only vague anecdotes that painted her as someone worldly but unassuming. The less he knew, the better. When the check arrived, Sebastian waved it away without a glance. Consider this an investment, he said with a smirk. In what? Marla asked, tilting her head. In you, he replied, standing and offering her a hand. I've got a feeling about you, Marla. Don't disappoint me. Sebastian wasn't the only connection Marla nurtured that week. She spent her evenings attending charity mixers, art auctions, and cocktail parties, slipping seamlessly into conversations and introducing herself as if she'd always belonged. With each event, her confidence grew. But not everyone was charmed. Evelyn Gage's sharp gaze followed her at every gathering, and Victoria Langford's icy demeanor remained a constant barrier. Marla suspected they were probing for cracks in her story, but she held her ground. Every detail she shared was rehearsed. Every anecdote was a layer in her impenetrable facade. Still, the mysterious text lingered in her mind, a dark cloud over her growing triumphs. One evening, as she prepared for another event, her phone buzzed again. Her stomach dropped as she glanced at the screen. Another unknown number. Unknown, you wear the mask well, but masks can slip. TikTok little climber. Marla's hands trembled as she read the message. Whoever this was, they weren't guessing. They knew. Her mind raced through possibilities. Could it be Evelyn or Victoria? Someone from her past? Or was it someone she hadn't even considered? At the event that night, Marla couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She kept her movements calculated, her conversations sharp, but the nagging suspicion grew with every passing hour. By the time she left, her nerves were frayed. Back in her apartment, she paced the room, replaying every interaction from the last week. The pieces weren't adding up. Someone had the upper hand, and she couldn't afford to lose control. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. She froze as she opened the message. It was a picture of her at the Langford Gala, standing with Sebastian. The angle was too precise, too deliberate. Whoever took it had been watching her closely. Unknown. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. Marla sank onto the couch, her mind racing. She had to find out who was behind this. Because if they knew what she really was, they could destroy everything she'd built, and she wasn't about to let that happen. The game was escalating, and Marla had no choice but to play smarter. The stakes were higher than ever, but she'd come too far to stop now. The Social Climber. Chapter 4. The Rival. The city sparkled beneath a shroud of misty rain, the kind that turned the streets into mirrors reflecting the world's wealth and grime in equal measure. Marla gripped her umbrella tightly as she stepped out of the cab, her breath fogging in the cool evening air. Tonight's event was Victoria Langford's charity auction, an annual spectacle drawing the city's most powerful figures. For Marla, it was an opportunity to solidify her place among them. For her rival, it was an opportunity to unmask her. The grand ballroom of the Langford estate was as ostentatious as its owner, adorned with glittering chandeliers and priceless art. Marla's entrance was as carefully calculated as ever. She wore a sleek, floor-length emerald gown, its understated elegance a deliberate contrast to the over-the-top ensembles many attendees favored. Heads turned as she entered, but none lingered longer than Victoria Langford's. Victoria stood near the auction stage, her polished features betraying none of the disdain Marla knew simmered beneath the surface. She wore a shimmering silver dress, a crown of subtle diamonds resting on her throat. If Victoria had designed tonight to make herself appear untouchable, it was working. Marla made her way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, all while keeping Victoria in her peripheral vision. Every step brought her closer to her rival, the tension between them building like a silent drumbeat. By the time Marla finally approached, the air between them practically crackled. "Miss Greystone," Victoria said, her smile as sharp as a blade. "What a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see you here." Marla matched her smile with one of her own, softer but no less dangerous. "I wouldn't miss it. Your events are legendary, after all." "Indeed." Victoria's eyes swept over her, taking in every detail of Marla's appearance with a critical gaze. "I must admit, you've made quite the impression lately. It seems Sebastian has taken a liking to you." Marla laughed lightly, the sound practiced to perfection. "Sebastian has been kind enough to introduce me to this world. I'm grateful for his generosity." "Generosity," Victoria echoed, her tone dripping with mockery. "Yes, that's one word for it. But tell me, Marla, where exactly does your gratitude come from? You seem to have appeared out of thin air." The words were a challenge, their meaning as clear as the crystal glasses in their hands. Marla felt the heat rise in her chest but refused to let it show. Instead, she tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "Thin air is a curious place," she said softly. "It often produces the most unexpected treasures." Victoria's eyes narrowed, the tension between them palpable. Around them, the hum of the party continued, oblivious to the war being waged in whispers and glances. As the auction began, Marla took a seat near the center of the room, strategically placing herself within view of the stage and the key players in the crowd. Victoria's opening speech was predictably flawless, her poise and confidence radiating from the stage. She spoke of philanthropy, community, and the importance of giving back, her words drawing polite applause from the audience. But Marla wasn't listening. Her mind was elsewhere, analyzing every interaction, every glance that came her way. Someone here was watching her closely, and she had to figure out who before it was too late. The auction proceeded without incident, but Marla's nerves were fraying. When Victoria announced the final item, a rare diamond necklace donated by the Langford family, Marla knew this was her chance to shift the narrative. She raised her paddle, her heart pounding. 200,000, she said, her voice steady. Gasps rippled through the room. Victoria's eyes snapped to hers, a flicker of surprise breaking through her polished exterior. The bidding war that followed was intense, but Marla never faltered. When the hammer finally fell, she was the winner. The applause that followed was tepid, the room clearly stunned by her audacity. But Marla didn't care. She had made her move, and she knew Victoria wouldn't be able to resist a confrontation. Sure enough, Victoria cornered her as she was leaving the event. "That was quite the performance," Victoria said, her voice low but brimming with contempt. "Do tell me, how does someone like you afford such extravagance?" Marla met her gaze, unflinching. "It's called ambition, Victoria. Something I'm sure you're familiar with." Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Ambition without roots is just a storm waiting to blow through. You don't belong here, Marla. And I will find out what you're hiding." Marla's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. "Then I suggest you look carefully, Ms. Langford. You might not like what you find." As Marla left the estate, the weight of the night pressed down on her. Victoria was closing in, and the mysterious messages had yet to be resolved. She had made her move, but the game was far from over. For now, all she could do was keep climbing, and pray the ground didn't give way beneath her. The Social Climber. Chapter 5. The Conspiracy. Marla's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the string of anonymous texts on her phone. The words played on a loop in her mind, each one digging deeper into her nerves. "You wear the mask well, but masks can slip. Tick-tock, little climber. The higher you climb, the harder you fall." She had tried to brush them off as idle threats or a jealous rival's ploy to rattle her, but the latest, the photograph of her and Sebastian at the gala, had shattered her confidence. Whoever was behind the messages wasn't just watching, they were close enough to document her every move. The question was, how close? Determined to uncover the sender, Marla began her investigation the next morning. She retreated to a nearby cafe with a steaming latte and her laptop, using the bustling atmosphere to disguise her growing paranoia. Her first step was to analyze the messages. The texts had been sent from different numbers, each untraceable through standard lookup tools. The photo of her and Sebastian provided no clues, it was clear and candid, but the angle revealed nothing about the photographer. Her gut told her it wasn't Victoria. The Langford heiress was too proud to operate in the shadows. She'd want Marla to know she was the one pulling the strings. Evelyn Gage was a possibility. Her sharp gaze and probing questions hinted at suspicion, but Evelyn didn't strike Marla as someone who'd waste time on cryptic texts. No, this felt personal. Someone who knew more about her than she wanted to believe. That afternoon, Marla took a calculated risk. She reached out to Sebastian. Sitting on the worn leather couch in her apartment, she dialed his number, forcing her voice into its usual soft, confident tone when he picked up. "Sebastian," she began, "I need a favor." Straight to the point. "I like that," he replied, his tone light. "What's on your mind?" "I've been receiving some unusual messages. Nothing overtly threatening, but enough to make me uneasy." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of messages?" Marla hesitated. She had to play this carefully. "Just vague things. Warnings, mostly. And then there was a photo from the gala. It's probably nothing, but it's unsettling." Sebastian's tone shifted, the casual air replaced by concern. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Do you think it's someone from the gala?" "I don't know," Marla admitted, keeping her voice steady. but I was hoping you might know someone who could help me figure it out. Sebastian sighed. I can make some calls. See if there's anyone who can trace the numbers or look into this for you. In the meantime, be careful. People in this world can be possessive about their secrets. I will. Thank you, Sebastian. As she hung up, Marla felt a twinge of guilt. She wasn't sure if Sebastian could help, but involving him added another layer of complexity to her web. If nothing else, it kept him invested in her survival. That evening, Marla attended a networking dinner at Evelyn Gage's penthouse. She hadn't planned to confront Evelyn directly, but the opportunity presented itself when she found herself alone with the media mogul in the study. Evelyn was pouring a glass of whiskey, her movements precise and deliberate. Marla, she said without turning around. I didn't expect you to linger so long in my home. Enjoying yourself? It's a beautiful place, Marla replied, stepping closer. You have impeccable taste. Evelyn turned, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. Flattery is cheap. What do you really want? Marla hesitated for only a moment before taking a calculated risk. I've been receiving some strange messages. I was wondering if you knew anything about them. Evelyn's lips twitched into a faint smile. Strange messages? From whom? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Marla met her gaze, refusing to flinch. But they seem informed. Almost as if the sender knows more than they should. Evelyn sipped her whiskey, studying Marla over the rim of the glass. And you think I'm behind them? How charming. I think you're someone who values information, Marla countered. And I'm someone you're clearly curious about. It's not a stretch. Evelyn set her glass down, her smile widening. You're bold, Marla. I'll give you that. But if I wanted to rattle you, I wouldn't waste my time with anonymous texts. I'd let you know exactly who was coming for you. Marla's heart sank. Evelyn's words had the ring of truth, and her confidence suggested she wasn't the sender. But if not Evelyn, then who? As Marla turned to leave, Evelyn called after her. If I were you, I'd stop looking for enemies. Sometimes they find you first. That night, as Marla sat in her dimly lit apartment, her phone buzzed again. Another message. Unknown. Your time is running out, little climber. The truth always finds its way to the surface. But this time, the message included an attachment, a grainy photo of Marla standing outside her apartment. Her blood ran cold. Whoever was sending these messages wasn't just watching from afar, they were following her. Marla realized she had two choices, run or fight. And running was never an option for someone who had clawed her way this far. She needed to identify the sender, and fast, before her carefully constructed facade crumbled around her. The Social Climber. Chapter 6. The Trap. Marla stared at the latest message. The image of herself outside her apartment burned into her mind. Whoever was behind the texts wasn't just threatening her, they were taunting her, proving they could reach her at any time. The question wasn't if they would expose her, but when. But Marla had spent her entire life navigating impossible situations. She wasn't about to let some shadowy figure ruin everything she'd built. If they wanted to watch her, she'd give them a performance worth seeing. She was going to set a trap. The first step was to draw her stalker out of the shadows. To do that, she needed to create an opportunity, an event where she could control the environment and observe everyone around her. After careful consideration, she decided on hosting a small, exclusive gathering at a boutique gallery she'd recently been introduced to through Sebastian. Sebastian was only too happy to help, thrilled by the idea of Marla expanding her social reach. He made the necessary introductions, and within days, the invitations were sent. The guest list included a mix of allies, rivals, and potential suspects, Victoria Langford, Evelyn Gage, and a few other key figures who had shown interest in Marla's rapid ascent. The gallery itself was the perfect venue. Its minimalist design offered clear sightlines, and the staff was discreet, used to catering to high-profile clients. Marla worked closely with the event planner to ensure every detail was flawless. From the curated selection of art to the placement of the security cameras she'd secretly arranged to monitor the space. The night of the event arrived, and Marla stood at the entrance, greeting each guest with her signature poise. Victoria swept in with her usual air of superiority, her gaze scanning the room as though searching for weaknesses to exploit. Evelyn arrived shortly after, her expression unreadable but her presence magnetic. Others followed, including Sebastian, who seemed genuinely proud of Marla's ability to pull off such a sophisticated affair. As the evening unfolded, Marla kept a close eye on her guests, watching for any sign of unusual behavior. She circulated the room, engaging in light conversation while mentally cataloging every interaction. The art was the perfect distraction, its intricate details drawing guests into deep discussions that allowed Marla to slip away unnoticed. She retreated to a small office at the back of the gallery, where the security feeds were displayed on a monitor. The room was a sea of shifting bodies, their movements graceful and deliberate. Marla's eyes flicked between the screens, searching for anything out of place. Her patience was rewarded an hour later when she spotted a figure lingering near the bar. They weren't engaging with anyone, their focus instead fixed on her every move. The man was tall, with dark hair and a lean build, dressed in a suit that was slightly too formal for the occasion. He didn't stand out immediately, but there was something about his posture, rigid, tense, that caught Marla's attention. Marla returned to the main room, her heart racing as she approached the bar. The man didn't flinch when she stepped into his line of sight, but his eyes followed her closely, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Enjoying the evening?" she asked, her tone light but edged with curiosity. "Very much," he replied, his voice smooth and measured. "You've done an impressive job bringing everyone together." "And you are?" Marla pressed, tilting her head in feigned ignorance. "Michael," he said, extending a hand. "Michael Greer. A friend of Sebastian's." Marla accepted his handshake, her mind racing. She hadn't seen this man at any of the events she'd attended with Sebastian, and Sebastian hadn't mentioned him in their conversations. "I'm glad you could make it, Michael," she said, masking her suspicion with a warm smile. "It's always a pleasure to meet someone new." His smirk widened, and Marla felt a chill run down her spine. "The pleasure is all mine, Ms. Greystone." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Marla kept a close eye on Michael, noting how he moved through the room with unsettling ease. He seemed to know exactly when to engage and when to fade into the background, never drawing too much attention to himself. By the time the event ended, Marla was certain he was connected to the texts. But she needed proof. After the last guest left, Marla locked the gallery and returned to the office to review the security footage. As she scanned the recordings, her suspicions were confirmed. Michael had spent most of the evening watching her, his movements calculated and deliberate. She paused the footage on an image of him standing near the entrance, his phone in hand. A closer look revealed a timestamp that matched the moment she'd received another text during the event. "Unknown, you're a talented performer, little climber. But even the best acts come to an end." Marla's hands tightened into fists. Whoever Michael Greer was, he wasn't just an observer, he was a player in the game she was fighting to win. The Social Climber. Chapter 7. The Paranoia. Marla woke the next morning with a gnawing sense of unease. Michael Greer. The name echoed in her mind like a warning bell. He had infiltrated her carefully constructed event, observed her every move, and then left without a trace, except for the text that confirmed he was more than a casual guest. But who was he? And more importantly, what did he want? Marla knew she couldn't confront him directly, not yet. She needed leverage, something tangible to use against him. Her instinct told her that Michael was a piece of a larger puzzle, and pulling at the wrong thread too soon could unravel everything. She started her day at a cafe far from her usual haunts, a place where she could disappear into the background while she searched for answers. Her laptop open, she scoured the internet for any trace of Michael Greer. The name yielded little, too common to narrow down, and no photos or affiliations matched the man from her event. Frustration mounting, Marla reached out to her contact in the world of private investigations. She'd used him once before to dig up dirt on a rival during her early days in the city. His fees were steep, but he was discreet and effective. "Ms. Greystone," he greeted her over the phone, his voice clipped and professional. "What can I do for you?" "I need everything you can find on someone named Michael Greer. He attended a gallery event last night, tall, dark hair, mid-30s. Claims to know Sebastian Wellesley. I'll look into it. Usual terms? Yes. But I need this fast. Understood. That evening, Marla returned to her apartment to find another text waiting for her. Unknown. Curiosity killed the cat, little climber. Be careful what you dig for. Her stomach dropped. Michael, or whoever was behind the messages, knew she was looking into him. But how? Her paranoia surged, each shadow in her dim apartment suddenly alive with menace. She closed the blinds, double-checked the locks, and sat in the middle of her living room, her mind racing. She couldn't let him win. Whoever he was, whatever game he was playing, Marla refused to be a pawn. The next day, her investigator called back with a preliminary report. Your Mr. Greer is elusive, he said, an edge of curiosity in his voice. No public records under that name in connection to Sebastian Wellesley. However, I found a few pieces that might interest you. What kind of pieces? Marla pressed, pacing her apartment. He's registered as a guest at the Riverview Hotel downtown. Booked under a corporate account tied to Langford Industries? Marla froze. Langford Industries? As in Victoria Langford? That's right. Could be coincidence, but I doubt it. He's been in town for 2 weeks, staying under the radar. No social media, no paper trail. Marla's mind raced. Michael wasn't just a random interloper, he was connected to Victoria. Was she using him to spy on her? Test her? Or was Michael operating independently, with motives of his own? That night, Marla made her move. Dressed in a dark trench coat and oversized sunglasses, she lingered near the Riverview Hotel's entrance, waiting for Michael to emerge. Her heart pounded as she rehearsed what she'd say if he saw her, but hours passed without any sign of him. Just as she was about to leave, a black car pulled up to the curb. Michael stepped out, his sharp suit and confident stride unmistakable. He spoke briefly with the driver, then entered the hotel. Marla followed at a distance, her pulse racing. Inside, she kept to the edges of the lobby, watching as Michael approached the reception desk. She couldn't hear his conversation, but his body language was relaxed, almost cocky. After a few minutes, he turned and headed for the elevators. Marla hesitated, torn between following him and retreating before she was noticed. Her decision was made for her when Michael stopped abruptly, turning his head just enough to glance in her direction. Their eyes met. Marla's breath caught as a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. He didn't approach her, didn't call her out. He simply stepped into the elevator and disappeared behind the closing doors. Marla returned to her apartment shaken but determined. Michael had seen her, but instead of exposing her, he'd chosen to let her stew in her own paranoia. It was a power play, and she hated that it had worked. Her phone buzzed as she paced her living room. Another text. Unknown. I see you, little climber. Let's see how far you're willing to fall. Marla stared at the message, her fear giving way to anger. If Michael thought he could intimidate her, he had another thing coming. She had clawed her way too far up the social ladder to let someone like him pull her down. She needed to outsmart him, to uncover his true motives and turn the game in her favor. And if that meant playing dirty, so be it. The Social Climber. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Marla sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. Her carefully curated image, a mask of poise and perfection, felt fragile, cracking under the weight of Michael Greer's mind games. But she wasn't going to let him break her. If he wanted to play, she'd raise the stakes. Her plan was simple: draw him into the open and force his hand. The next step was far riskier, confronting him directly. She didn't know how far Michael was willing to go, but Marla wasn't about to back down. 2 days later, Marla attended a private soiree hosted by a tech magnate she had recently charmed. The event was smaller than the usual galas, but the guest list was just as exclusive. She'd arranged for Michael to be invited, pulling strings through Sebastian, who'd happily vouched for her growing influence. The venue, a sprawling penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, provided the perfect backdrop for the confrontation. Marla's dress, a striking black gown with a plunging neckline, commanded attention, but her mind was firmly focused on Michael. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, every word, every expression. It wasn't long before she spotted him. Michael arrived late, his presence as deliberate as ever. His dark suit fit him perfectly, and he carried himself with the same unsettling confidence that had unnerved her from the start. Marla approached him with a glass of champagne in hand, her smile polished but icy. "Michael," she said, her voice smooth. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't show." Michael turned to her, his smirk as infuriating as ever. "Miss me already?" Her grip on the glass tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "I've been curious about you. It seems you've been keeping a close eye on me." His smile widened. "Can you blame me? You're quite the enigma, Marla." "Flattering," she replied, her tone sharp. "But let's skip the games, shall we? Who are you really? And what do you want?" Michael's expression shifted, his smirk fading as he regarded her with cold amusement. "Straight to the point. I like that. But the better question is, who are you, Marla? Because I've been wondering the same thing." Her stomach twisted, but she refused to let him see her fear. "I think you already know," she said evenly. "You've been watching me, haven't you? Sending those messages. Following me." He chuckled, the sound low and mocking. "Following you? No, Marla. I've been protecting you." Marla blinked, caught off guard. "Protecting me? From what?" Michael leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "From the people you're so desperate to impress. You think you're climbing the social ladder, but you have no idea how dangerous this world is. One wrong move, and they'll tear you apart." Her pulse quickened, but she refused to let him intimidate her. "And what makes you the expert?" "Let's just say I've seen what happens to people who fly too close to the sun," he said, his gaze intense. "You're playing a game you don't fully understand, Marla. And if you're not careful, you'll lose everything." Marla's mind raced as she processed his words. Michael wasn't denying his involvement, but his motives remained frustratingly unclear. Was he truly trying to warn her, or was this another manipulation? "You seem awfully concerned about my well-being," she said, her tone laced with skepticism. "Why?" Michael's smirk returned, but it was colder this time. "Let's just say I've been where you are. I've seen how this ends, and it's never pretty." Before she could respond, Michael straightened, his demeanor shifting back to its usual calm. "Enjoy the party, Marla. And remember, the higher you climb, the harder you fall." With that he walked away, leaving her standing alone, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. As the evening wore on, Marla couldn't shake the weight of his words. She returned home to find yet another text waiting for her. "Unknown, you've been warned. Don't make me intervene." Marla's fear was quickly giving way to anger. Michael's cryptic warnings and veiled threats were nothing more than attempts to control her, and she wasn't about to let him. If he thought she was going to back down, he was sorely mistaken. She spent the next few days digging into Michael's connections to Victoria Langford. Through Sebastian, she learned that Michael had briefly worked as a consultant for Langford Industries, but his employment ended abruptly, with rumors of a falling out. What was Michael's endgame? And why was he so invested in her downfall, or survival? The chapter ends with Marla deciding to turn the tables. She plans to lure Michael into a scenario where she holds the power, forcing him to reveal the truth. But as she sets her plan in motion, she knows she's walking a fine line between triumph and disaster. The Social Climber. Chapter 9. The Fall. The storm outside mirrored the chaos in Marla's mind as she paced her apartment. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was darker than she'd anticipated. Michael Greer was no ordinary player. He was a shadow, lurking on the edges of the elite world, connected to powerful figures like Victoria Langford. And now, he had set his sights on her. But Marla wasn't one to cower. If Michael thought he could control her with vague warnings and cryptic texts, he didn't know who he was dealing with. She spent the next 2 days meticulously crafting her plan. She needed to put Michael in a position where he couldn't hide behind his enigmatic persona. To do that, she arranged a meeting under the guise of a high-stakes business proposition. Through Sebastian's connections, she learned Michael had a particular interest in discreet investments tied to art galleries. It was a gamble, but Marla knew how to sell an opportunity that was too good to resist. The meeting was set for a private room at an upscale lounge downtown. Marla arrived early, her confidence bolstered by the sleek black suit she wore, sharp and commanding, a departure from her usual glamorous gowns. She needed to project authority, to remind Michael that she wasn't just a pawn in his game. When Michael arrived, his expression betrayed nothing, but Marla could sense the undercurrent of intrigue in his movements. He slid into the chair across from her, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "Marla," he said, his voice smooth. "I'm flattered you thought of me for this opportunity." Marla smiled, leaning forward slightly. "Flattered enough to listen?" Michael's smirk widened. "Always." She launched into her pitch, weaving a tale of an exclusive art acquisition opportunity tied to a prestigious gallery. The details were convincing enough to pique his interest, but vague enough to conceal her true motives. As she spoke, she watched him carefully, looking for cracks in his composure. "And what's in it for you?" Michael asked when she finished. Marla tilted her head, her smile sharpening. "Let's just say I believe in strategic alliances. And you strike me as someone who appreciates discretion." Michael chuckled, the sound low and knowing. "You're good, Marla. I'll give you that. But let's stop pretending this is about art. You didn't bring me here to make a deal, did you?" Her pulse quickened, but she didn't let it show. "Why don't you tell me what you think this is about?" Michael leaned back in his chair, his smirk fading into a more serious expression. "You want answers? About me, about the messages, about why I've been watching you." "And?" Marla prompted, her voice steady despite the tension crackling between them. Michael sighed, his gaze flickering to the glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're not the first, Marla. People like you, people who think they can climb their way to the top without consequences, you always end up the same way. Broken, exposed, and discarded." Marla bristled at his words, but before she could respond, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I've seen it happen. I've made it happen. And I can stop it from happening to you, if you're willing to listen." For the first time, Marla felt a flicker of doubt. Michael's words weren't just threats, they carried the weight of experience. But she refused to let him dictate her fate. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her tone sharper than intended. Michael studied her for a moment before replying. "I want you to stop chasing shadows. Victoria Langford, Evelyn Gage, the entire world you're trying to infiltrate, they don't care about you, Marla. They'll destroy you the moment you stop being useful." "And you're different?" she shot back. "Yes," Michael said simply. "Because I don't want anything from you. I'm here to warn you, not control you. The question is whether you're smart enough to listen." The rest of the meeting was a blur. Michael left before she could press him further, leaving Marla alone with her thoughts. His warning lingered in her mind, intertwining with the fears she tried so hard to suppress. That night she received another text. "Unknown. The game ends soon, little climber. Choose your side wisely." Marla stared at the message, her anger and fear colliding. She had come too far to back down now. Michael Greer might know the rules of the game, but she was determined to rewrite them. The Social Climber. Chapter 10. The Legacy. The city skyline gleamed in the distance, its glittering lights casting faint reflections on the glass walls of the Langford Tower. Marla stood in Victoria Langford's office, her back straight, her nerves wound tight. This was it, the culmination of weeks of manipulation, strategy, and survival. Tonight, the truth would surface one way or another. Victoria sat behind her massive mahogany desk, her expression as cold and unreadable as ever. Across the room, Michael leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, a faint smirk playing on his lips. The tension in the air was suffocating, but Marla held her ground. "You requested this meeting," Victoria said, her voice crisp. "So, speak. What could possibly be so important that you'd call me at this hour?" Marla took a deep breath, her gaze flicking to Michael. "I think we all know this isn't just about business." Victoria's brows lifted ever so slightly. "Is that so?" "Yes," Marla said, stepping closer to the desk. "I know what's been happening. The texts, the warnings, the games, it's all been orchestrated. And I want answers." Victoria's lips curled into a faint smile. "You're accusing me of, what, exactly?" "I'm not accusing anyone," Marla replied, her voice steady. "I'm here to uncover the truth. Because if we're going to play this game, I deserve to know the rules." Michael chuckled softly, his voice dripping with amusement. Bold of you to assume there are rules, Marla. She shot him a glare before turning back to Victoria. Why did you send Michael to watch me? What do you want from me? Victoria leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. Michael isn't my puppet, Marla. He operates on his own terms. If he's been watching you, it's because he sees something useful. Marla's pulse quickened. Useful? What does that mean? It means, Michael interjected, stepping forward, that you've caught the attention of some very dangerous people. People who don't appreciate outsiders meddling in their affairs. Marla's hands clenched into fists. Then why not just cut me off? Why the games? The warnings? Because, Michael said, his tone softening, I wanted to see if you had what it takes to survive in this world. Marla stared at him, her anger giving way to confusion. This was all a test? In a way, Michael admitted. But not just mine. There are others watching you, Marla. Others who've been waiting to see if you'll rise or crumble. Victoria's smile widened, cold and calculating. You've been ambitious, I'll give you that. But ambition without caution is a liability. Michael and I wanted to see if you could navigate the traps we set for you. Marla's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. The texts, the warnings, the photo, they had been deliberate, orchestrated to push her to her limits. And she had played right into their hands. What happens now? She asked, her voice low. That depends on you, Michael said. You've proven you can handle pressure, but this world demands more than that. If you want to survive, if you want to thrive, you'll have to make a choice. What choice? Marla demanded. Victoria stood, her gaze piercing. Loyalty. To us, to this world, to the rules we set. If you agree, we'll protect you, guide you, ensure your success. But if you refuse, she trailed off, the threat implicit. Marla's heart pounded as she considered her options. She had spent her life clawing her way up, refusing to bow to anyone. But now, she was faced with a decision that could either secure her future or destroy everything she'd built. Taking a deep breath, she looked Victoria in the eye. I've come too far to turn back now. I'll play by your rules, for now. Victoria's smile returned, triumphant. Good. Then let's see how far you're willing to climb. Michael's smirk deepened, his eyes gleaming with approval. Welcome to the real game, Marla. As Marla left Langford Tower that night, she felt a mix of triumph and dread. She had survived the test, but at what cost? The world she had fought so hard to enter was darker and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. And now, she was bound to it. But Marla Greystone wasn't one to settle for survival. She had chosen her path, and she would walk it with her head held high. Because in the end, the only thing that mattered was the legacy she left behind, and she intended to make it unforgettable. The social climber. Epilogue. The pinnacle. The city spread out beneath Marla like a glittering jewel, its lights twinkling in the clear night sky. She stood on the balcony of her penthouse, a glass of champagne in hand, the faint hum of an exclusive gathering behind her. The journey to this moment had been treacherous, marked by lies, manipulation, and betrayal. But she had made it. 3 years had passed since her fateful meeting with Victoria Langford and Michael Greer. In that time, Marla had become a force to be reckoned with in the world of high society. She had mastered the art of walking the tightrope between loyalty and ambition, earning the trust of the elite while quietly amassing power of her own. Victoria had become an unlikely ally, mentoring Marla in the ways of their world. Together, they had built a network of influence that spanned industries, ensuring their names carried weight in every boardroom and gala. But Marla never forgot the cold warning in Victoria's eyes that night in the tower. The alliance was one of convenience, not friendship. Michael had vanished shortly after Marla's initiation into the inner circle. She heard whispers of his involvement in shadowy deals and clandestine operations, but their paths never crossed again. Sometimes, she wondered if he had been a figment of her imagination, a ghost sent to test her resolve. Tonight's gathering was a celebration of Marla's latest achievement, securing a multi-million-dollar partnership that would cement her status as a key player in the art world. The guests were a who's who of power and privilege, each one eager to bask in Marla's glow. But as she gazed out over the city, Marla felt a familiar pang of unease. The higher she climbed, the more precarious her position became. Every handshake, every smile, every whispered deal carried the weight of expectation. One misstep could send her tumbling back down the ladder she had fought so hard to ascend. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Admiring your kingdom?" Marla turned to see Victoria stepping onto the balcony, a glass of wine in her hand. Her expression was as composed as ever, but her eyes held a glimmer of approval. "Just enjoying the view," Marla replied, matching her tone. Victoria leaned against the railing, her gaze sweeping across the city. "You've done well, Marla. Better than I expected. Coming from you, that's high praise," Marla said with a faint smile. "But don't get too comfortable," Victoria continued, her voice hardening. "This world has a way of turning on its own. You'll need to stay sharp if you want to keep what you've earned." Marla nodded, the weight of Victoria's words settling over her. "I'm always sharp." Victoria studied her for a moment before raising her glass. "To survival?" "To survival," Marla echoed, clinking her glass against Victoria's. As the night wore on, Marla moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her every word and gesture calculated to reinforce her power. But as she smiled and laughed with her guests, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being watched, still being tested. The legacy Marla had built was formidable, but it came with a cost. She had traded her soul for success, her innocence for influence. And while she had no regrets, she knew that the climb never truly ended. Because in the world she had chosen, there was no such thing as a safe place. There was only the next move, the next conquest, the next rung on the ladder. And Marla Greystone was determined to keep climbing, no matter what it took. The end.